to start recording before I forgot.
Oh, sorry.
The and just something to think about. Anthony and I were talking about that ballot question and that it didn't fail, and that's fine. But from what I was hearing and seeing in the community, and this goes back to what we talked about with the workshops. Once this committee decides, what they want to recommend, it's really a lot about education and outreach, because a lot of people, I don't think they know what the town clerk's office does in its entirety. They think it just runs elections, which is a very small part of it, and they feel like that was the reason why it needed to continue to be elected. And so I thought that was just a good point to demonstrate that there's a lot of outreach that needs to happen with the public to really educate them and inform them on whatever changes are recommended by this committee. Because when the information was presented at the town meeting, they understood it, and I think they understood the capacity of the position and understood why it would be beneficial for it to be appointed. I don't think it was presented the same way to just the residents to vote on. So just something to think about. And I think it makes a big difference. Obviously, I think so. And however it ended up voting, but I just think there was a lot of misinformation, or just misconceptions, I should say, with this ballot question. So I think that's, it's just a good point for us to keep that in mind, that once this committee decides what direction they want to go, and it really needs to be a hard push with the public to educate and inform.
Well, I think for everything, which that's one piece of it, but I do think a bigger conversation once we go through the language is about elected and appointed, and like defining, what constitutes one versus the other. And then I think we can make a case for all the things that we think should be elected or should be appointed, and see if maybe we can get something kind of in mass.
Yeah, if I can just
Yes,
comment on
Brock.
that, from the limited few people who reached out to me with any opinion, it seemed that that little postcard that arrived in the mail, trying to educate people, seemed to spook people. I don't know what about, if it was the physical mailing, the contents, but that's what get brought up to me was the card, and it alarmed them more than educated them. The other thing what was brought to my attention or questioned was the fear of appointment for partisan purposes, that a party and members thereof on the select board would use that as a partisan weapon, and that was brought up to me by a couple of people. But those are the two things that, of anything was brought to my attention, it was postcard was, again, I don't understand why, but it was found unnerving, and there was the partisan machinations of I guess Sean and his buddies on the select board, and how would that be done if it was appointed.
It's
in the
interesting.
meantime, they ended up electing the same person that the select board appointed. So,
Yeah,
they should have told them something.
the card we sent out, we were required to send out notification of so we thought that was just the simplest way. But it's one thing people didn't think about was what happens if the town clerk retires again. Now, we were kind of all hands on deck here, but it's an elected position, and if the town took the position like, well, I don't know, that's an elected position, the office is just not open until something happens, or if someone's new is appointed that they have no experience, I don't know. The town voted to keep that an elected position, so they don't think about those things. We were left in a bind when Lynn left, and like I said, it was all hands on deck. But technically, when it's elected, you're like, well, what is it? Who's responsible for it if something happens to that person? And it's not clear in the charter, and I don't know if it's clear in the statute. So interesting.
To your point earlier, Sean, I could see something like the Secretary of State's office puts out, those in favor say this, those against say this, and have that information put out to the voters so that they could see. Because I found myself, even when a couple people asked me, I remembered one of the issues was that they had to come before the Finance Committee every year to ask about their salary, and that didn't seem right to me. So that was one of the reasons I thought it would make sense to be appointed, but it would be hard. And I'm on the Finance Committee. You'd think I'd be able to come up with more, So it would be helpful. That education piece, I think, is a good idea.
Well, also, one thing that could be very clearly within our committee's responsibility is to suggest language that says, in the event that somebody dies, retires, or can't do it, there is a specific mechanism, perhaps appointment by the select board, to appoint an interim person until the next election. At least that way you get somebody who knew how to do the job.
Well, you don't know that. You could appoint
Well,
anybody.
I guess they could, but there's 5 selectmen. I got to believe that a majority of them would have some understanding of what the job is.
I'm not gonna say much of anything. I mean, I can't imagine how many appointments I've made over the last 11 years, and not one of them has ever been controversial or called partisan. So,
It's just interesting in this day and age that, you're relying, it's a position that, like I said earlier, a lot of people don't know about. It has a lot of responsibility in town that's just operational and record keeping that is people don't think about. And you could have someone come in there that has 0 experience in a clerk's office, managing people, dealing with the public. So it's just interesting that the town's says, well, no. So someone could, Sarah's been great. We really lucked out. But if we got somebody in place that was just not capable, what do we do? And then you have them for 3 years. So it's not, it's not something like, hey, you're not working out. It's been 6 months and this isn't the right fit. They could just be like, well, I'm here for 3 years.
Right.
Or importantly, cooperative with other departments,
Right.
because that is key with the clerk's office. We need a clerk that's cooperative. Sarah's great. I mean, she'll drop anything for anybody. But if you have somebody in that position that's not, and just tells us all to go, pound sand,
Mhm.
it creates a lot of problems for a lot of other town employees.
and to be honest with you, that was kind of the gist of the whole thing, towards the end of the last clerk was the cooperation. It wasn't there. There was a great quote from somebody back in 1997, 96. They want you to shop, they want you to make the dinner, but they're not letting you shop for the groceries.
Well, I do think that is certainly a piece that people could hang their hat on, saying it needs to be appointed because the person needs XYZ degree or qualifications. And by having an elected position, it doesn't appear that you would need qualifications. You just need to win the popular vote.
Mm.
So, I mean, that may be something
any
when we
elected
go back
position.
and look,
Yeah.
that we add in some more specific language about specific qualifications or degrees,
right
which
now, it
then
can't
would
be
make
done
it
of
that.
anything because it's an elected position and anybody can be elected to any position.
Right.
That was one of the things, one of the threads that was happening on social media, was like, well, what can we do to make qualifications for people for elected positions? You can't.
Well, you can't, but I think that's the way that we can market it differently. There was no change of qualifications.
But the qualifications for a town clerk, really, what are they? Do you have to have experience in filling out a death certificate? Basically, can you read, can you write, can you file? Are you able to be a notary?
Well, then I think that is something we need to discuss. I mean, certainly if you should be a notary, then the candidate has to be a notary. If that's something that we felt, I just think that I'm just looking for another way, a way to market it and make a distinction as to why we wouldn't want the police chief to be elected. What if we elected someone with absolutely no policing background?
Yeah, then you get somebody like Dwayne Johnson in Walking Tall.
Well,
No, I mean, seriously, I mean, they elect their sheriffs, down south. But not so much. I mean, we elect the sheriff too.
right.
But the sheriff structure up here is an entirely different than down south. Down south, it's law enforcement. You know, it's guys put you in jail, write tickets and all that kind of stuff. And those are elected. And to be honest with you,
Are you saying that
Engineering
Hodgkin
scary.
doesn't have power?
he has some power, but he
Yeah.
doesn't have the power that is like down south.
Well, Sean's point's valid. Hodgson's authorities primarily care and custody of inmates. He's not sending out patrol cars through Dartmouth, New Bedford, and arresting the people to bring to the jail. Down south, they're running everything. For example, almost on a daily basis, we get requests from other states asking for information that the jail doesn't have on arrests and such, because that's the town of the Dartmouth Police Department has. But in their experience, the county sheriff, he runs absolutely everything and has full arrest authority and can bestow that on his officers. So to Sean's point, yeah, the only qualification down south is, they're not even getting signatures in some of those counties. They're paying a ballot access fee, getting the name and getting elected. They could have absolutely zero law enforcement experience. Forget being a notary for a town clerk. So I mean that's the problem of an elected office. In Massachusetts, I mean, you get, was it 250 signatures? You can run for most offices, state rep, I believe. State Senate is not much higher. There's no qualifications for that. And we're treating the town clerk just like those offices where, maybe we should. And I agree we shouldn't. I voted to make it appointed, certainly myself. But we can make some prerequisites, absolutely. But as of right now, the prerequisites only kick in once the appointment happens. So you need to educate them to vote for the appointment so that we can have the prerequisites to have the person, it's a few steps backwards almost.
So would we say, trying to bring us back, would we say that instead of just it's a language change, it's an article change for the town clerk? Would the town clerk, as thinking of the position as being someone who has a certain set of skills that may not be what the elected person running has, does it then become under Article 4 under this executive branch?
That's a question
We-
for Anthony.
Right, so we have the Department of Budget and Finance, which is a hired position. The Executive Administrator, which is a hired position. And then it's the Department of Public Works, which is a hired position.
Yeah, it's just,
So you're asking, will the clerk be under that section? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, if we moved it to Article 4 and structured the information under here with a certain set of skills, and just as it is here, the scope, the organization of the department, the powers and duties, and listed it under here, will that these people are hired, appointed, what have you, not elected.
Just looking at what other sections there are.
Because right now she's under section 3-11, town clerk, and everything else there. Well, school committee's elected, board of trustees is elected. Town moderator is appointed. I mean, this is one of the things, it's elected.
Yeah, because we have historical commission under that section as well. I'm not sure I would call them executive branch, but yeah, that's the only place it fits in here. Unless you create another subsection for other appointed positions. Because we moved the historic commission there as well, because they're appointed, correct?
In 4,
Yeah. It's the only place it would fit unless you created another subsection somewhere else, so yes. It would be into section 4.
I mean, right now it has to stay in section 3 because it is an elected position.
Right.
But we
So,
can't, I mean, we
and we're
can't
not
move
the
it.
group. We're just making, if we feel at the end of our appointment, if we feel strongly that enough changes have to be made to this charter, we then will say that the charter needs to be an elected charter so they can have more teeth in that.
No, we can make, we can make these changes and we can submit it. We're doing it, this is a significant rewrite, but it's not a change in the form of government. You only need an elected charter commission if there's a change in the form of government. We're not doing that unless you plan to go to a mayor or a town manager form of government. You can make all of these changes. Now, the reason why, what you had asked earlier, if some of our changes were, why are we doing now what I did 10, 11 years ago? It's because the commission decided the best way to present the changes would be in individual warrant articles. And there was a number of them. And they went through and said, well, okay, we're not going to present this one. We're not going to present that one. They narrowed it down. And they thought, because there had been those significant changes to the charter for 10 years, that if we gave them a red line thing like this, that everybody would freak out. So they picked the most important things that they thought needed to be changed. And then they submitted those in individual warrant articles, some of which were voted up, some of which were voted down at town meeting. The thought was it's going to be wow, what a discussion. If you give them something like this, if we make a lot of changes, there's going to be lengthy discussion and a million motions at town. It's going to be a long town meeting. There's no question about it. But we do, at the end of our meetings, we can put together a new amended charter as with a lot of changes, which we're doing now, with our recommendations. And then they'll have to be discussed one by one and motion on town meeting floor. People will be making motions to amend here and there. It's going to get pretty complicated and lengthy. You can go to an elected charter commission, but again, that is only needed if you're doing a change of form of government.
Okay, I was thinking that we were making so many changes that maybe there needs to be but if it really is decided on the change of government is what it needs to be elected, then.
Yeah, and if we think there are
haven't
some that are going to be more
proposed that.
controversial, we may want to pull those out and put those in in separate warrant articles. So we can say, okay, this is just all grammar and, fixing other things that, to make it legal, fixing prior mistakes.
Aligning it to
and also
statute.
making it consistent with what we're doing now. And then you could do separate warrant articles for, okay, now this is to change these boards to appointed boards, something like that. But first we got to figure out what we want to do, and then we can take that approach to decide how we want to present it to town meeting.
Because I will let the committee know that Brian had sent me some information. He's done some research about the pros and cons of changing the number of town meeting members. And Anthony, if we were going to suggest a change to the number of town meeting members, would that be a change to the government
No.
body or?
No, it's
No.
not change the form of government. No, it's not.
Okay. All right, I'm going to lead us back to, I have some cryptic notes on 4-4. We got to 4-4B 4 last time we were together. But I will say this one is kind of a messy one. We have a lot of changes in it. Oh, and Mary Wade has joined us.
I guess.
And Sean McGinnis, you've read through your part, and is it reflective of what you do?
Yes. For the most part, yeah.
Is there anything we need to add, delete, change? You're the one head that's here that can tell us.
Yeah, well, that's if it depends on, what the committee decides as a whole, what they want to do with some of the organizations in town. So, I know we talked about the Board of Public Works overseeing the DPW director. If that changes, then that would be incorporated here.
Okay,
But for the most part, it reflects the current organization of the town and the roles and responsibilities of the town administrator.
I will say, today I was doing some other work that gave me some time to like poke around on the town website. And one of the things that I had found was notes from a charter review committee. Unfortunately, they're not dated, so, but it did have a nice, I'm just gonna hold it up so everybody can see. It did have this nice graphic
Mhm.
which said, what the position is. The category headings are, sorry, the position, the minimum screening committee composition, who they respond to are under the direction of, and then the policy guidelines are set by. And the chief of police has the respond to direction of the select board. Everybody else on this list is under the executive administrator. And then they have a board that they might set policy guidelines, except the director of budget and finance, the chief of police, and the building commissioner. Everybody else has some sort of board that they are beholden to. I'll hold this up again.
Right.
I don't know if you can see it.
Well, some boards are advisory and other boards have more oversight or input. So I created a organizational chart for the FinCom. I think I can share that. I think
Okay.
and it shows you which boards and committees, how they are related to the positions. I can actually, well, I'll email it out now, but
That'd be great. Thank you, Sean.
yep, let's see here.
I just thought that the graphic of it would be helpful for this committee to see. But I think what we should look at is section 4-5, which is the Department of Public Works. Because this one is sort of most current in a change that's happening in the town. The superintendent is or has retired and a new one's coming on board, and
Right.
It's actually an interim.
or interim.
Yeah.
Okay, so section 4.5,
So
this
just
is,
an
yep.
FYI, I sent that org chart, so it's large, so you need to zoom in. It's an Adobe file, but you won't be able
Okay.
to view it all because it's just, I couldn't get it in a smaller sheet.
Okay. So Board of Public Works, appointment, composition, term of office, there shall be a Board of Public Works that shall consist of 3 persons who are appointed by the Select Board for terms of 3 years each. The terms of office shall be so arranged that the term of office of 1 member shall expire each year. That's not a very large board. I mean, there is no consistency in our structure currently of our charter of the sizes of boards.
Yeah, but you don't need to, I don't think, we have a hard time getting 3 qualified people sometimes. I don't think you want a bigger board for the.
No,
No.
God, no.
No, I wasn't stating that we need a bigger one. I was just kind of stating, you know, we're gonna talk about this is a 3-person board, the next board we're gonna talk about is 9. I mean, there just seems to be a
Yeah, well,
little,
I think that one, I'll agree with you. That should be reduced, but. I
9
don't
is a
think you
big
should-
number.
I don't think you should increase the Board of Public Works. Just knowing how they operate and being involved with them over the years. And knowing that it's hard to find, you want to find somebody that has some kind of public works background, and sometimes it's hard to do. At times, we've had great boards. We've had people who've had the superintendent's position in a different town serving on our board at the same time, and they were a great resource, but sometimes it's hard to find that.
Right.
Sean, you'd agree, right? Sean McDonald?
Oh, yeah.
And I was not suggesting to increase it. I was just making a statement of the range of numbers we have on boards.
And I think it depends on what the board's doing. And when you're talking about historic commission, I think at times we've had vacancies on that board, and they've had to go around and try to find people to fill those vacancies. Years past, I remember them having quorum issues, but I don't know how they are now. Maybe they're fine. I haven't really dealt too much with them. By the meeting minutes I have seen, they've had enough people to have votes. So,
The Historic Commission,
yeah.
they are. They've been having some lively meetings this year, so they are.
Yeah, they have
well attended.
personality issues.
But if we look at section.
I have the right to remain silent.
Now I want to know.
4-5B,
To watch.
if everybody could just read through 4-5B.
I don't want to get a nasty letter tomorrow, Sean, so I'm not gonna say anything.
Anthony did have a question. If the town dump section, if you look at that, was still necessary.
No, they can get rid of that. We don't have a town dump anymore.
It's called something else.
It's a
Well, they
region.
have a transfer station now.
Yeah, but that's not the town dump.
Right. We have a refuge district,
Right.
which has a landfill.
We don't do mosquito and moth control.
No,
Bristol County does.
Yeah, they've come here to the farm.
Yeah, I've
Bristol
never heard of
County.
moth control.
Not moth, but they do mosquito. They come down
Right.
and do, certainly they have on the farm.
Not since gypsy moths, I don't think.
So do we take that out?
I would probably change town dump to transfer station. And then get rid of, and mosquito and moth control.
That makes sense. Do we have a tree warden? That's just something I'm not familiar with.
Yes, we do.
Oh, wow, okay.
He
Well,
has
the
the
last time we
powers
put a
and duties. He has the powers and duties to arrest branches at anytime.
Last time he put a tree in custody was quite a while ago.
I think some of the ones on Tucker Road on our place have been put in custody. They've been problematic.
Now, that's under the jurisdiction of the planning board. Because it's a
Okay.
scenic road.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's the other thing that you gotta realize, that there are scenic roads in town, designated scenic roads in town. And if it comes time to a tree removal on that, that's entirely up to the planning board.
So Sean, what are is there a list somewhere that we could look up what the scenic roads are in town?
Yes,
Planning board would have it.
Okay, interesting.
yes, because when any developer wants to do any work on scenic roads, they're supposed to be, they're approached differently for both the trees and stone walls and such.
Right.
Yeah, they do have a list. I gotta
No, my
run.
mother-in-law manages that, but
I have
that's
to run
interesting.
6:45, so I apologize, but I have another.
Oh,
meeting after that.
Okay.
okay.
Thanks, Sean.
Anthony.
Thanks, guys.
Now, this is where we can oversee.
All
the
right, so I
planning.
guess my question is the Board of Public Works, if you're saying that tree warden falls under the planning department,
No. No. The tree warden stays with the DPW.
Okay.
It's just, there's also another layer of trees that fall under the scenic roads, which is a jurisdiction of the planning board. That's
So-
just, that's in the general bylaws.
Okay. But we can leave off mosquito and moth control. That's
Yes.
understood, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
And then change the word town dump to transfer station.
Yep,
okay.
Responsible for-
May I ask a question about the DPW board?
yep.
I don't have a long history of understanding this stuff, certainly not a whole charter cycle. But if the DPW board is appointed by a 5-person board of selectmen, and let's say, there are very different duties of that board. The DPW, they plow the snow, they organize the picking up the trash, they check out the radii that we on the planning board have to approve or not for a new development. But they also have a huge responsibility for the fundamental waterworks of the town, and that's a completely different skill set. And how do we know that when we have a 3-person board like that, that we have, as we do right now, we're lucky right now, we've got a super expert on water matters presently on that commission, but how do we assure that we keep that? And that's just one example. The reverse could be true too. If we were weak in some other area, how do we know that we've even got qualified people appointing that if we don't spell it out a little bit more?
Well, oh, go ahead, Sean.
The problem with that is that when there's a vacancy that occurs, you're asking a member of the general public to step up. And what we try to do is we try to look at the skill sets that they present us and try to make the best fit possible. We've been lucky that, yes, we do have somebody with water, a water skill set. We're also lucky that we have somebody who has, who works in the DPW office. And really the only lay person that is on that board is resigning at, in a week or two officially. And then, we'll have a reappointment for that person. Now, I think we're going to be fortunate to have a replacement that will just kind of blow the doors off of, you're going to look at it and go, oh my God, really? But at this point in time, we try to look for we try to look for people. We try to even beat the bushes looking for somebody who may be able to make a legitimate mark on the board. There have been times though that there hasn't been that. And the only good grace in that is that the department is actually run by professionals, and that the DPW, the BPW is actually a policy-making board.
Okay.
Same as a select board, same as the planning board, policy, that the professionals present the policy and debate is made on the policy to find out whether the policy is good or not. And then that decision goes forward from that point. I don't recall ever seeing a member of the Board of Public Works actually, saying that this is the way a sewer line has to be laid out, or something similar to that. Or this is how trash should be picked up, or this is how water lines should be. That's all done by the superintendent and his professional staff.
I'm less concerned about the day-to-day skills than I am about the planning ahead 3 to 5 years. The charter lasts for what, 10? And or however many it is. I'm more concerned about making sure we have the broad base of expertise as we face climate change, sea level rise, major changes in the floodplain districts. We're fortunate now we have those bases covered at the moment, but I just don't want to have a situation where the appointing body doesn't fully understand the full scope of the problem. I'm not worried about laying out pipe routes and stuff like that.
But I mean,
Well, I think the benefit is that the select board, because they're the appointing body, needs to keep those things in mind.
Yeah.
And if
no,
they
we're
don't have
confident
quality
that we're doing that,
candidates,
I think that's
can
good.
say, we're not prepared to appoint the individuals that have come forth, and make a better effort at looking for quality candidates.
Yeah. I don't know if the charter needs to say anything about it. I just wanted to raise the question, but from what Sean said, it sounds like there's a pretty thoughtful process in place right now.
I mean, we do try to, the first and foremost for me, on anybody looking to be on the committee is the actual willingness to volunteer. Okay, first of all, that's the hardest part, is getting
Yeah.
somebody to volunteer. After that, then it's looking at, the resume as to what they do. It's like looking at, for somebody who's on the historical commission. The willingness to be there, and then seeing that, they've had some experience working with Whale, or they actually live in a historical house, because this, there's a lot of things that go and that encompasses that, I would, another one, and now that Steve just popped up in my screen, because I have you all minimized because I'm looking at the charts, the charter. I mean, I would be very hesitant to appoint somebody on the Waterways Commission who's never been on a boat.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
mean, that's, I mean, so when looking at appointments, there are certain skill sets that go with that appointment that I want to do. Just like if there was an interim, if there had to be an interim appointment on the planning board because somebody, somebody left before their term, I certainly wouldn't appoint a developer on it.
Right.
That's having the
Good
fox
point.
guarding the henhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question that I haven't found the answer to, and I apologize because I'm going between computers here. But Board of Public Works, it doesn't mention residency. Is that something that board alone doesn't have to be a resident to be appointed, or is it implied, or how does that?
I think there's another section in the charter that says anybody on a board or committee needs to be a resident of the town. I forgot
Okay.
what section. I think we reviewed that earlier.
All right, I just, it was a question that was brought up and I couldn't find the answer in this section of the charter, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't vote, I wouldn't appoint somebody from Acushnet to be, sitting on a board in town. Sorry.
Right.
I mean, Acushnet might have been part of Dartmouth way back when, but you guys left in 1860.
And there's no skin in the game either.
Right, exactly.
So if we're done with section B, if we move into section C, Director of Public Works, this is what we wanted to change to be superintendent.
Right.
Mhm.
And I saw Anthony's sidebar notes, and I don't really understand how that one word would make a difference in whether or not someone could
Yeah, I don't think that.
take
would
on
make
another
any difference.
job.
Yeah. That would, the title wouldn't make a difference.
Right. No, oh God, I know I'm probably gonna get a lot of flack for this, but if Richie Medeiros is pushing for something, you don't want it.
Was pushing.
Yeah, God rest
His soul.
God rest in peace, Richard. But
So, what we would want to put there is superintendent of public
Well,
works. Is that the term?
I mean, you have a water superintendent and a wastewater superintendent. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's really semantics. It's whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, but maybe
I like
Director of Public Works is,
yeah, I like the Director of Public Works because that's the whole thing. He directs the whole public works. And then you have a water superintendent. You could have, I think you have also a yard superintendent.
I think that's right. I think that, it puts that person above.
It's
In a
sort of
way.
like general, major, lieutenant.
I again, without being attached to any history here on director, superintendent, I agree with you. That sounds sensible.
All right. So if we could all read everything else, keeping in mind that we're suggesting it stay Director of Public Works.
Okay, there's a couple things in here that,
Oh, so I guess the section that he may have been talking about was down halfway, engage in any other business, occupation, or profession while serving in such office.
Why is that?
I don't know, but to me, if was a DJ on the side, I don't think that's a
Right.
big deal.
I think it's a conflict.
If he's a DJ,
DJ,
Well, that's right. Like, I mean, if it's not a conflict of interest I mean, wouldn't that be dealt with in his ethics? You know,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
exam, like I would
Contracts.
presume that you could, you know, like I serve in, school committee, but still make pillows on the side or whatever. I mean,
Right.
I kind of agree with you. I mean, there are natural conflicts, but if it's not a natural conflict, which I would imagine,
right, which would be handled through the ethics.
I agree.
Yeah. The obvious example would be if you had a DPW person who also plowed snow for a living and charged to communities money for that. But that is covered in other areas, isn't it?
Right. And I would think again, they couldn't, you couldn't be a high school teacher and tutor your own students. But again, you could plow in another town, just not plow in Dartmouth, I would imagine. Just like,
But
right.
also, you
I
gotta
guess
assume
unless
that
you're
he
calling
has
in
a
sick.
contract for employment.
No, if you're the DPW superintendent, you shouldn't be plowing in another town. You should be paying attention to whether Dartmouth's roads are being plowed in a timely
Well,
fashion.
right. I'm just, yeah, I know.
I
I'm
think
talking
it
about
goes
jobs.
back to if, the director of public works or the superintendent, it does work and happens to do work with a contractor that has a contract in town to do work, that's where things get muddied. So
I
Right.
can understand.
I think this is
Or
just
as
a
a
broad
part owner
brush
in
stroke to avoid that.
Solar or wind power or something, I can see that being an issue. But again, I think that comes under conflict of interest.
Yeah, the standard conflict of interest and ethics
Right.
policy should cover that. If it doesn't, then we should tune up that language.
I think so.
The
So I would
other thing
imagine
I
that you have
wanted,
this conflict.
my question in this is where it talks about and shall fix compensation. So the screening committee for the Director of Public Works is one member of the Select Board, the Executive Administrator, and one member from the Board of Public Works, according to this chart,
yeah, that's the screening.
the screening committee.
Mhm.
So would it make more sense that that level of screening committee? I mean, I would even say that the Director of Budget and Finance be one of those positions that sets the budget for this position.
Well,
But we don't,
Heidi,
we
I can
go
tell you.
in saying what the budget is gonna be for the position.
Right,
We-
so, and this is where it gets confusing, and this is something that I wanted to bring up. We've done a classification and compensation study in town, and we've done every position, including the Public Works Director. So, this is where it gets confusing, where you have a Board of Public Works, but how much do they know about compensation and comparable communities? And what should be the appropriate compensation for this type of position. Now, we've gone through and done that, so I think that should be, in my opinion, it should be under the select board where they would set the compensation and not the Board of Public Works. I mean, the Board of Public Works, their role is different. It's their water and sewer commissioners. And they evaluate public works policies, but they really shouldn't be involved with compensation or contracts for that matter. I don't think. I mean, that's something that falls under the select board.
But I thought the weird thing in this was that it wasn't under B, Board of Public Works Powers and Duty. It was under C, the Director of Public Works. So who is he fixing the compensation, he or she, fixing the compensation of? It sounds like he's or she is fixing their own compensation.
No, the Board of Public Works fixes the compensation of the Director of Public Works. And I was looking for that. I know it says it. Trying to
But
find
see
where
the
it says that.
second sentence? It says the Board of Public Works shall appoint for a term of not more
Yeah,
than 3
no,
years and shall
and shall
fix the compensation. Can't we just take out and fix the compensation?
Yes, I think you should, because that's something that should fall under the select board.
Right, they may say, give this guy $1 million.
Well, they've set some, yes, we're working out that old.
We don't want to
contract.
lose this good candidate.
You're right. And so I won't get into particulars, but it can be inconsistent with policies, personnel policies that we have for other employees in town. I'll leave it at that. So we want to be consistent.
So we should make sure, but this is the only position that we've looked at that has that in here.
Mhm.
Nothing else has that. So I think if we just take that the Board of Public Works shall appoint for a term of not more than 3 years.
Well, they shouldn't, the select board should appoint.
That's what I thought too. I was
So
confused on that.
the select board appoints the Board of Public Works. So to me, again, my opinion, the select board should be appointing the Director of Public Works, not the Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works, to me, their role is different.
Okay. So if we remove that entire long sentence, Director of Public Works, and we just go to, it's in the 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, fourth sentence, way at the end where it says, the Director of Public Works shall be specifically fitted by education, training, and experience to perform these duties.
Well, you have to say who appoints.
Yeah, I think you can leave it in and just change where it says Board of Public Works to Select Board. Shall appoint for a term of no more than 3 years and shall fix the compensation.
So here's my
John.
question. This doesn't change until we go through town meeting and go through
Voting.
voting. So right now we have an interim, or we will be getting an interim Director of Public Works.
There is an interim,
There is an interim who was appointed by
the DPW.
the DPW.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah. So this doesn't become active until these other steps, but I
yet the
agree.
But yet the interim director works with Sean. Meets with Sean on a weekly basis. It goes over stuff, so it's like, okay. So I
So
just
Sean
think-
McDonald, then what are your thoughts here? I mean, what are you, I'm
Personally, I think it just should say Director of Public Works. The Select Board shall appoint for a term of not more than 3 years. Keep that all the way through right there. Where I have another issue though, is where it says the Director of Public Works may be removed only for just cause and by a through vote of at least 2 members. That's leaving a lot of power for 2 people to get rid of somebody for just cause.
well, not only that, if they're not the people, if we're kind of removing their ability to appoint that
you would-
person,
Right.
You would
that's
remove
then it
that.
seems that
and
we
that-
should
and that
reverse.
be changed to
Right.
by a vote of at least 3 members of the select board. I mean, I'll
Right.
be honest with you, I don't think there's any, well, there is, I was just looking at the yeah, see, it's in the town administrators, for cause being provided, the town administrator may only be removed for cause of being provided notice which states the reasons for removal after being given the right of a hearing and after a vote of at least 3 members of the select board. That same language in the town administrator should also be down here for the
Director of Public Works.
Director of Public Works.
That sounds
All right,
sensible.
Anthony's not here, so Melanie, did you get all of that?
Dawn,
Okay,
you
great.
can
Could I
explain
just
the
back up one
question you-
second? I was.
Sure,
out
Stephen.
just a moment when it was talked about the setting of the qualifications. If the select board's going to be allowed to appoint the person, does the Board of Commissioners or the Board of Public Works get to specify the qualifications for the person to be, or 3 people to be considered? Or is the select board taking over that role too?
Well, I can just tell you from experience, there's usually a team that is on the interview committee, and it's select board members, Board of Public Works, is usually myself, the personnel director. So it's, and the team can be whoever the select board wants to put together, but generally it's
And you don't
collaborative
feel
effort.
there's any need for the charter to specify a team, at least with a certain amount of expertise or something?
I
I
wouldn't visit
kinda-
those particulars in the charter, no.
Okay.
But that job inherent has to have certain qualifications.
We have a job description for the position that, that has the certain requirements.
John
So
McKenna, I have a question. You referenced
Harry?
personnel policies
Yes.
previously. So in other jobs I've had, there's a person set up personnel policies. They have job descriptions, hiring practices, etc. Is there any other board in the town of Dartmouth that has the responsibility of appointing the department head?
The
School
school committee.
department.
Another
School committee.
School
Anything
committee,
School committee.
Board of Health,
the Board of Health, I'm trying to think, yes.
Planning Board.
Well,
Because I think if that's the case, I think what the laws have changed from 10 years ago. I would imagine that there are personnel policies that apply to all of these areas. And I'm wondering if this needs to be looked at more systematically than just looking right now. I get what you're saying. I'm just wondering if this is something that we should be looking at in all the department areas.
no, I agree. That's, we should have a consistent hiring policy. And, it's a lot of these department head hirings, like when we hired the planning director, that was a collaborative effort with the select board and the planning board. So I don't know if we maybe articulate that more in the charter or maybe in the personnel policy. Just, who's involved in appointing positions.
The school committee is by statute, right?
Mhm.
Is that Steve?
Committee is by statute. but
Yeah,
I don't
by
think
It is
it's-
by statute, yep.
But understand this, this is the only department head that's appointed by an appointed board. All other department heads are either appointed by, all other department heads are appointed by an elected board.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
Oh,
about-
so that's the piece that is.
This is the oddball.
tricky.
That's true.
Was our DPW elected at some point?
Way, 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 way back in this, or before the 60s.
Okay. Might be a holdover from that.
It seems that this is something that I kind of agree we need to revisit. I wonder about the language, if we should include, this is back to what Sean McGinnis was, kind of implying that this is somewhat of a group, that there is consultation between, that team between the select board as well as members of this, the Board of Public Works. I don't know that we, how much we want to specify that, but
Well, if we
Yeah.
change this, that the select board shall appoint, then it's a position appointed by an elected board.
that's true.
So,
That's true.
So it eliminates the problem.
yeah, I think you'll
That's,
see
yeah, that,
in-
you have a good point.
in the org chart I sent out, it states, the top is kind of the elected boards and committees and who they are responsible for hiring. So say the planning board is elected,
Okay.
they oversee the planning board of health. That's just what Sean was saying, but it kind of lays it out here a little
Okay.
easily.
Okay,
Then it
gotcha.
goes down to the select board and,
It is in fairy font.
what's that?
It is in fairy font.
Is it?
But as I said, this piece that I found in the charter, and that's one of the things for this particular position, it says that the screening committee is one member of the select board, the executive administrator, and one member of the Board of Public Works.
But
But
what is that from? That's just from their minutes, right?
No, this is document, it says, this is the Charter Review Committee approved motions.
From the
There's
last,
no date at all.
that's probably something that wasn't adopted in the last charter review or from the last charter review group.
Right.
But that could be also,
There's 18 motions. The first one is to eliminate the town agent, and the last one,
that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was,
I like the idea of the appointed review committee that you just mentioned, Heidi, but having the one DPW, the administrator and the select board representative, but only in the context of an elected board, the select board being the appointing authority. I guess on principle, an appointed board appointing someone, that has a horrible ring to it, just on simple principle ground. There should be an authority that that has accountability to the voters. Like I said, I don't think everyone has to be elected, town clerk, for example, but there has to be some final elected authority, not a tertiary, the electeds appointed the group that appoints the person. That's too far down the line. So I'm open to
Especially if they're also
advisory.
setting salary or something, or
that-
some sort of strange compensation.
That also,
Terry
gets
Ham?
to- that gets to the point also of making sure that there's a distinction between a screening committee, which is like sorting out the 3 best resumes from 40 that applied,
Yeah,
to an appointing group. We should be clear on that distinction.
I
Right.
mean, I
And-
look back at chapter 3 on elected boards and powers and duties, and none of them so far say that they appoint the director. So perhaps we can just format this section to match the sections in that chapter and eliminate that hiring piece. That might be one way to address this. Because apparently, I don't know that to be true, but somebody just said that the elected boards appoint their department heads. It's not in the charter, if that's the case.
No, but generally you can, when you have the screening committee language can be part of the personnel policy. And same thing with the appointing or I guess the appointing of department heads can be a collaboration between the board that the department head will serve under and the select board. With the exceptions of, the school committee. That's their bailiwick.
but they should be following something similar, which I believe they do. So we have a screening committee, then I would assume there is some sort of interview committee, and then there is the appointing authority.
Well, generally, the
That's a
screening
board.
committee is the interview committee.
Do we want
What?
to get that specific in the charter? Does this
No,
need to be?
I think that's
charter?
more,
So-
that's more personnel policy.
So my suggestion would be that we just eliminate the language that talks about setting compensation, appointing, and move that, like all the other department heads, to the personnel practices, and just eliminate it from this.
Because to be honest with you, what's Terry's saying, by moving it to a personnel policy and getting it out of the charter makes it a lot easier to do exactly that without having to go through town meeting and voting.
But we will need to vote to remove it,
Right,
right?
right. And
But
and-
I agree, if we need something more universal, there seems to be, it's like it was written, created in isolation. And I think we're really trying to have it read more like one unified document.
Yeah, and the justification for removing it could be that it's being in line with personnel policy. Existing personnel policy.
When you look at your town charter, the format, for example, under Board of Health, A, composition, term of office, B, powers and duties. This should be written the same way. A, composition, term of office, B, powers and duties, and it should not have a hiring function. And they could certainly, it makes perfect sense what Sean said in terms of management practice, to have them involved in the screening and the interviewing and all of that, but the charter itself and the personnel policies should be more specific. Now, I don't know who would make that language change, because so far Anthony's just been doing grammar and, but is that something that you could reformat, Sean McKinnon?
Yeah, we can work on wording for that.
Just to
yeah.
make it more consistent with the other boards.
Should the term of office of 3 years be looked at as well? Because I don't think that we hire people for a term of years. We hire them generally either under a state statute or under an employment agreement.
Well, I
Right, but
mean,
the contract would typically be 3 years.
right.
Sure.
But that
Right.
should also be under the policy, the
Well,
personnel policy.
the town administrator has 3 years written.
So is that every 3 years? Is that going to be a search committee and then that collaboration or?
No, because it says basically the town administrator shall be appointed by the select board for the term, it should say term, or for terms not to exceed 3 years.
Okay,
In the school department, any
And it becomes a
any
reappointment.
administrator in their contract, it's 3 years.
Right.
And then it becomes a reappointment, not an appointment.
So looking at beyond that first bit, and I really don't, even the elected office, I guess we should look under the bigger policy where that they must have, when they originally wrote this, there must have been an issue that they had a concern about.
Where are you, Heidi?
In that same paragraph where they're talking about the shall not engage in any other business, occupation, or profession while
Right.
serving in such office, then the removal by just cause by just 2 members, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
So far, we're
If
down
those-
to
if-
It's a mess.
So
the
going
director
back
of
to-
public works shall render to the board of public works as often as may be required a full report of all operations under the control of the director of public works during
Well-
any particular period, and provide further that the director of public works shall make annually and from time to time as required by the board of public works a synopsis of such reports for publication, provided further that the director of public works shall.
You know what, Heidi, as I go back to chapter 3, there's nothing in there about the director of, about the Board of Health director or about the other comparable position. So I'm just wondering why this is, maybe it goes, I know at some point the town collector was elected, the town assessor was elected, and now they're appointed. If these are appointed positions, shouldn't they be part of a personnel manual and not in the charter? I mean, maybe that, I could be mistaken. Maybe there's a reason because of the law that it needs to be in here, but it's not consistent with other department head positions.
No,
So
I agree.
I think it's making it more complicated than we need to.
So I made a note in my notes to work with Anthony to kind of redraft this section 4.5 to kind of be more consistent with the rest of the charter. And then we can revisit that.
And I'm not sure Anthony knows the answer to Sean. We might need to get somebody else to answer that question, because I would think that when he was reviewing it, he would have asked himself that same question.
Well, I think that is a larger issue, and that's something this committee needs to look at. So, you know, Anthony's just going through, this is just his formatting and with some questions. But if, you know, this is for this committee to decide, yeah, you know what? We think the Board of Public Works, the director should be more like the other department heads and have consistent wording to match that. So, and we can certainly do that. And then the same with the Board of Public Works, you know, how do you view that? We talked about them setting the compensation. So, you know, I think we'll change that as well. So, but I'll look at other charters as well and see if we can find something. And these are all things that goes back to, okay, we've made a lot of evaluation here. We brought up a number of issues. Maybe the Collins Center, now's the time to have them come in and say, you know, what are some best practices for charters that, when we look at the directors of public works. So.
Can I just bring up 2 quick points on this? One is the suggested changes didn't fly at the last 10-year review. Town meeting didn't buy what we're talking about now, so that needs to be looked at. And second, the removal of the director of the Board of Public Works is going to have to reflect the appointment change. So if the select board makes that appointment, the select board can remove, but you need to also consider whether it'll be a supermajority or just a majority of the select board. I know in some cases you need 4 out of 5, and others just a majority.
So Steve, at the end of this paragraph, it says that this was amended by town meeting in 2014 and approved by the voters in 2015. So
Okay,
that it must have
The,
been from the last charter.
Mhm.
you read some changes that were suggested that were not obviously adopted because they're not reflected here. The collaborative screening committee, I forgot what else you read, and it wasn't dated. So I don't know.
Oh, you mean from this weird
just-
document I found?
Yes, I took that to be unsuccessful suggested changes from the last charter review. And that
Now that there's another.
may not be the
chapter
case.
That has the votes that didn't go through. One interesting one, question number 2, non-binding, was a question about changing the government structure. And 1,128 people thought we should have a mayor or town council, which was more than 50% of the people who voted, but nothing happened. So. But there's another document on the town website that I found, Heidi, that has the previous charter. I looked for it when I first signed up for this commission. The superintendent of public works shall the town approve the amendment to the town charter, advertising of operating budget, town meeting and elections. And then they had a non-binding.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know, this is not dated, this document that I found, and I just worry when things can be found on a website without any reference.
True.
Why are they there?
Yeah.
It's
So
on the
let's
internet, it's
go,
true.
It is now 7:22. Let's just look at section 4.6, which is
Okay.
the Historical Commission. This was proposed, I will assume, by the last charter. It was added by town meeting in June of 2014 and approved by the voters in 2015 to add this Historical Commission to this section. And it just says that the Historical Commission shall consist of 9 members who shall be appointed by the Select Board to staggered terms of 3 years as provided by law. And powers and duties is that the Dartmouth Historical Commission shall have all the powers and duties of such commissions as provided by the general laws, blah, blah, blah.
Doesn't say a lot.
No, so I think this is something that had to be put in because of a state law
Mhm.
in order to get some sort of state money.
Yeah, that's most likely.
We needed a historical commission.
Sean McDonald, do you have trouble finding 9 members? Are you able to find 9 members? Is that
Yeah, we're pretty good there.
okay?
You
That's
know,
good.
same thing with the Agricultural Commission,
Mhm.
you know, but 9 members is a very large body. And the only other 9-member body that there is the Finance Committee.
Mhm.
However, it's a large body, but I served on the Historical Commission for several years. And
Right.
in theory, you're dividing up the work between the 9 members. Practically speaking, it's a 1 or 2-member commission being guided by the Judy Lund current for many years. But you're dealing with the Form B project, which is probably that's been going on for about a good 10, 15 years at this point, updating the historical records of almost every building in town over 75 years, starting from the earliest on up. Also dealing tremendously with the Historical Commission does less work of preserving and promoting history than it does as a function of the building department with the historic bylaw demolition. That's really what eats up 90% of the Historic Commission's time is reviewing and voting upon those demolition permits, and then dealing with possible historic demolition delay. I served on, I forget how many years, 5 or 7 years on the Historical Commission, and that's really every month what we were doing day in and day out. Much of the rest of it was, secondary, to be honest with you.
And one issue is that the historical buildings are 50 years or older, and 50 is
I believe it's 75 actually, but I'll stand to be corrected.
okay.
But that's what it is it's every time someone wants to change 25% or more of any one facade of a building 50 or 75 years, it triggers a demolition bylaw,
Right.
bylaw, which then comes before the historical commission, and we were used to dance with the times of scheduling meetings to accomplish the approval or rejection of that request. But that's, so really, like I said, practically speaking, the historical commission is an appendage of the building department.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
I'm gonna put a hold on this one, only because I'm wondering if some of that shouldn't be in there. But I'm looking at chapter 40, section 8D. So they must, it's gotta be listed within the chapter 40.
Let me just ask this one thing. I think the question is why is this here? And does it have to be here? Because conservation is not listed. Some of the other appointed boards are not listed.
Mhm.
Not a single appointed board is listed except this one. Oh, and the DPW. The only reason why the DPW board is listed is because of the director superintendent. So the question is, if that's the case, if the superintendent is if that whole wording is going to be consistent with the
There's gotta be a
with
reason.
the
so
hiring, with the
I agree.
policy
We
and
have
hiring
to- We have to
practices,
know why.
does the DPW board need to be even listed in this spot? Because these are all, well, no,
So-
I guess that's,
So
Maybe the
I'm
proper-
going to inquire. I will inquire
Yeah.
because I want to know as well, why is it here? It was added at the last, I think
And
it was
it was
added
moved.
by town meeting in 2014, approved by the voters in 2015. It had to be because there needed to be something within our charter so that we could get state
Heidi,
compensation.
can
Yes.
we find a copy of those town meeting minutes? I mean, there must be some sort of record of the discussion that,
Yeah,
for the reason. What's that, John?
Town meeting records just generally show the article and the
Okay.
nays.
The person who
I
can
guess-
tell you is Judy Lund. Undoubtedly, she was the guiding force behind any of that activity from
Okay.
the historical commission to the town meeting.
Great.
But I mean, in terms of, I see historical commission has virtually no funds. I mean, when I was on the board, even our stipend for paper and printing got taken from us. So I don't see where unless they were taking, dealing with grants like a local business giving $1,000 here and there for the signage project or something.
Right.
They're not dealing with vast sums of money even from the state, unless things have changed since I was on the board. So I don't. So if the reason to add it was for some availing ourselves of state funds or such, I don't see how that plays in. It did in my experience.
Heidi, I
Okay.
tend to agree with Sean McDonald because if you go to chapter 40, section 8B is Council on Aging, 8C is Conservation Commission, 8D is Historical Commission, 8E is Youth Commission. So I would imagine that a general statement that said that the select board has the power and authority to appoint committees to address whatever may come up, and I think that's probably under select board, that would cover this.
I just point out that same chapter 40, section 8D specifies that the historical commission shall be no less than 3 and no more than 7 members, for what it's worth, as Paul Harvey used to say.
Yeah, I would go with 7. 9 is just like, ugh.
I don't know that it works, but we are experiencing problems getting volunteers on some boards, maybe not this one. We could specify no more than 7 with a quorum consisting of a majority of those duly appointed. So if you only get 5 people interested and you have 5 appointed members, you can have a viable historical commission when 3 of them get together. And it doesn't require that we have 9 and 2 unfilled positions, and therefore the quorum is,
Well, that would be, a quorum would be of anybody who shows up to the meeting, as long as there's a meeting held. So if if a member is 9 members and five people show up, well, then that's the quorum,
But it has to be 5,
right? It
though.
has to be
Right.
5 people
Yeah.
showing up.
But if you,
I'd like to go back to a point that Brock made and one that Heidi asked, she was going to look into it. It seems like, I wasn't around at the time, but it seems like this special treatment of the Historical Commission must have come up for a reason. Was it in 2014 or whenever it was voted? And I have a suspicion or just a guess that reason probably had something to do with this difference that Brock brought up, that one part of the Historical Commission's responsibility is to sort of flesh out and illustrate and highlight Dartmouth's history. And another part is to prevent the crush of continuing development from trotting over things that didn't get properly reviewed. That's what you described as the arm of the building department, end quote. And there may be a reason in just sort of seeking balances of power and balances of responsibility that I wouldn't want to see the Historical Commission lose the ability to put a stop to a project that's digging up burial grounds or something of that sort. And I'm guessing that if we're going to really research it, if Judy's been in place for a long time, we ought to ask her so that we really understand why this authority came about.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
two quick
you can
things
put
though.
the authority of the Historical Commission in a general bylaw.
Well, and also to your point, when the time to stop a cemetery from being demolished happened, we didn't stop it. Go get your tropical smoothie and see the cemetery that was dug up. But you said the Historical Commission, whether it's 9 or 7, I wouldn't go any lower than 7. 9
Right.
might be too much, but during my experience, we had plenty of gaps in membership, but they were filled reasonably quickly. They weren't. It was never a quorum issue. But also, whether it's 7, 9, or another number, the practicality of members going to a historic site, up to and including the Ray Dome or just a regular house, is very rare. Most of the members would hear from the 2 or 3 people who did make the site visit, even though all 9 of them could. So the number doesn't have to be tremendous, but in theory, it's them doing the site visits, seeing and doing the research of how old the structure is. Is it historically significant? Should it be preferentially reserved? And if the Historical Commission does deem a structure historically significant, we can't stop the demolition in Dartmouth anyway. Our bylaw only allows a 6-month demolition delay, which is when you saw the Ray Dome.
And
get
that's
blown up
maybe
on
that's
6
when the
Monday.
real serious problem is, and we ought to address that kind of thing.
Well, the thought was always by the Historical Commission that the town meeting will never accept a strong demolition bylaw that would prevent demolition. So what we currently have is a bylaw that allows for 6 months of documentation and negotiation, but on the first day after 6 months, bring in the dynamite or the bulldozer. And so the Historical Commission, it has a rather disjointed existence. And like I said, most of our time was spent dealing with demolition bylaws, not anything of a real historical nature. It was just because the building's old. And then, is the building historically significant? 99% of the structures in Dartmouth are not historically significant. They're just old. Now, the Aiken House maybe, or again, we did declare the Ray Dome historically significant, and look what happened to that. So, I mean, the Historical Commission, it's a very schizophrenic board, in my opinion, where really the duties of the Historical Commission, as you might think of them, are being done by the Dartmouth Historical Art Society of the promotion and documentation of history. The Historical Commission is really, like I said, it's an appendage of the building department, at least practically speaking.
Well, that of course depends on how the building department sees themselves. If they're all pro-development, pro-developer, pro-real estate agent, that's one thing. If they're really the guarding the chicken coop like the dog, not the fox, that's a different thing. And so I think that I don't want to lose the protective ability of the Historical Commission. In fact, it might be a good idea to give it a little more teeth.
Well,
I think so. I mean, I'd like to hear from Judy Lund. I think it would be interesting,
Yeah,
like,
I'd like to hear from Judy Lund too before we take a position on this.
I mean, this is someone who, again, she has the, and she can speak to a lot of the reasons why this maybe was put where it is, and what needs to happen. I mean, I live in a historic home, so I have a attachment to this, so.
Well, she could probably also speak to the nitty gritty politics of somebody earlier in this meeting said, quote, town meeting would never accept a firm demolition ban. Well, why not? Is that because town meeting are the ones who show up are in the pockets of developers, or does the whole town really feel this way? Are there enough town meeting members representing enough citizens? I mean, I think Judy probably has a perspective on all that history too.
Right.
I'd like to hear about it.
I will contact Judy and fill you all in at our next meeting.
That's
Thank you,
great,
Heidi.
Heidi. Thank you.
Heidi, if I just may, the reason why I said that is because the historical commission had discussed a tougher bylaw. And the fear was not only would the bylaw not be made tougher by town meeting, but what we have in the book would likely be weakened or removed entirely.
Yeah, well, that's all
justification.
it's worth understanding, because some of this is toothpaste you never put back in the tube if you get it wrong.
Right.
You're right. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Well, that being said, we are,
Done.
Brock, just before everybody leaves, if you take a look in your chat, Brock did
Yes. Thank you, Brock.
type in a list of roads in Dartmouth that have been designated as scenic roads, as you recall an earlier discussion tonight about
Yep.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
I
if
do
you wanna-
recall that. I have to say something tongue in cheek with a smile on my face. If Tucker Road is a scenic road, I hope everybody's only looking to the west. We could do something about the east side of Tucker Road.
Well, it's the
I
entire
hope
road,
everybody
no
is
matter
looking
what.
at the road on Tucker Road.
Yeah, I understand. I
Yeah.
say that with tongue in cheek, but
Right.
that's an example of where past policy in Dartmouth did not put its best foot forward.
Well, we have a Gidley farm, so we've got a significant little window there.
You do. It's a
Well,
beautiful,
thank you for keeping it.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
All
yeah,
right,
it's
so
gorgeous.
I'm going to need someone to make a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All right, did you get that,
Second.
Melanie, who moved it? Okay, great. All right, I will run down the list. And just before we close, a reminder that our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, which will be
28th.
the 28th of April at 6 p.m. 6,
It is.
Heidi.
Yes, I
6.
apologize for being late.
Ooh,
Oh, God,
ooh.
no,
I'm a
Mary,
sole driver around the.
I had to
place
get a
right now.
personal phone call. I told myself it was 6:30 for some reason, so 6.
Oh, you did? Well, good, but because I was already late, so I was.
And
We'll have the count
link be-
remind
will
you.
the link be
One,
different or the same for the next meeting?
Oh,
Okay.
excuse me?
Is the link the same or different for each meeting?
The link is in the agenda. So when you
It
get to
is.
the agenda, the link is
It's
there.
right there.
Okay, thanks.
And we will start with, we're going to move into section 5 next time, and we'll review the minutes.
5 at 6.
5 and 6?
No, 5 at 6.
5 at 6.
5 at 6, okay.
Okay. Bye, guys.
All right, closing out this meeting, Heidi Brooks, yes. Brock Cadero,
Yes.
David Cunha,
Yes.
Terry Ham,
Yes.
Sean McDonald,
Yes.
Steve Mello,
Yes.
thank you. Brian O'Hare, still not here. Steve Taylor
Yes?
and Mary White.
Yes.
Have an awesome 2
Okay.
weeks,
All right. Thank you.
and we'll see
Cheers.
you